Hey, y'all, I'm Kim Stewart, host of Book Marketing Mania, where we talk about all the things to help you meet new readers and market your books online. Today, I've invited my friend Dr. Jen Bennett, author of Be Worth Following and host of the She Impacts Culture podcast, as my guest. Y'all may remember me talking about Jen in episode 30, where I shared my top Spark takeaways because she was one of the speakers I mentioned. We met years ago at a conference here in Dallas, and I've always loved learning all about social media from Jen and absolutely love her book, Be Worth Following: How to Be Different and Influence People in a Crowded Social World. I was so thrilled to get to see her again in person this year at the Spark Conference, where she was speaking on this topic. And immediately I knew I had to have her on as a guest to encourage you all as you market your books online. So you're in for a treat today. Let's get to it. Hey, Jen, welcome to the Book Marketing Mania podcast. I'm so glad you're here today to serve my listeners.
Kim, I am so excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. So y'all heard me gush about Jen in the introduction. I just love her and love her book, Be Worth Following. And I think it's so fun because this book released over 4 years ago, right, Jen?
Yeah, I think it came out, if I remember correctly, January of 2018.
Oh, I love it. It's still applicable today, even though all the changes happen on a daily basis in social media, which I think that's what's so cool is that this is really just biblically based. And we can, once we get these principles down, they're going to apply to us sharing our message on social media, no matter what changes, right? On social media.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to get Jen shares so many points in her book, but there was like 5 specific ones that she shared at the Spark conference that I really loved and wanted her to come on and share on the podcast. So we are going to just start rolling through 5 ways you can be worth following as you share your message on social media. So Jen, the first one is be successful. So what tips would you share for our authors tuning in about how they can be successful on social media?
Yeah. So, when it comes to social media, many of us have like a love-hate relationship with it. Especially as writers, as authors, we know that we have to build our social media platforms, but quite honestly, it can be so overwhelming. How do I know this? Because I've experienced this. I've experienced just feeling overwhelmed with trying to build my online platform as a writer. And so when it comes to this first tip of being successful, I think the key question we have to ask ourselves is, whose platform am I building? Mine or God's? And the reason I think we have to ask ourselves this question is because it can be so easy to look at it as building our own kingdom. And when we are building our kingdom versus God's kingdom, that's when we tend to get caught up into the trap of all the numbers, likes, shares, and downloads. And while these are important, especially in the field of writing and wanting to be an author and get published by a traditional publisher, the thing is, it cannot become the end all for us, because then when our numbers go up and down on social media, which they will, when we find ourselves not getting the new follows, the engagement, all of the things that we so want to get, we soon find ourselves questioning everything that we are doing and wondering, is it really worth it? Why am I giving all of my time to being on social media when I'm just not seeing the engagements and the numbers that I want to see? And so I think this is why it's so very important that we define what success looks like according to God's definition, and that we continually ask ourselves, whose platform am I building, mine or God's? Because here's the thing, when you really focus on building God's platform, then the numbers, the engagements, all of that will not have such a hold on you, and you will have so much more peace. And this is something I had to do in my own life. I have been turned down by publishers due to my numbers. And I'm like, I feel like I have some decent numbers and I'm still getting turned down,
Yeah. Oh gosh. And I know so many of our listeners are nodding their heads right now, right? They've been through that too. Yeah.
Yes, I actually had a publisher reach out to me. They wanted me to put together a proposal about a book topic. I put it all together and I loved it. And it got in front of the marketing team and they said, we love the concept, but you've got to have bigger numbers before we even think about this. So I understand it. It can be heartbreaking. And I had to come to terms with telling myself, Jen, stop focusing on the numbers because you are becoming obsessive about it. Instead, focus on what success looks like according to God for your platforms. That is what being successful is all about. And leave it in God's hands. Do what he asks you to do on social media and then leave it in God's hands. And I'll tell you, that has been so freeing for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. And yeah, we understand why the numbers are so important to publishers, right? When they're evaluating authors. But I just want to say again, if I didn't say it in the introduction, that Jen did self-publish her book, Be Worth Following. And here she is 4 years later, still serving new readers and meeting new readers and marketing her message. So I just love that. And it's not about all the numbers. And I pulled one of your quotes from the book that I love so much that you said, social media is about impacting the lives of others and your numbers have nothing to do with that impact. And that's so, so true. We all need to remind ourselves of that on a daily basis. Okay. So let's talk about number 2 of being worth following on social. And let's talk about being different. What tips would you have to share about how our authors can be different on social media?
Yes. So here is the key question to ask yourself once again. What makes you, you? And here is some good freeing news for all of you. And that is you don't have to do what everyone else is doing on social media to be successful. Your social media platforms, your posts don't have to look like everyone else's in order for you to be successful. You just need to be true to who God has created you to be. And the reason being is because when you are the real you, that leads to the best you. And so I really want to encourage your listeners to not be afraid to be different. Sometimes, again, I think we can get caught up in the trap of seeing what's working for other people on social media. And then we're like, well, let me try that. But it's not true or authentic to who we are. And so I just want to give your listeners permission to be different, to be who God has created them to be. And I'll share just a few questions here with you real quick that your listeners can kind of go back through and listen and really maybe even journal about. So like number 1, who are you as a person? One of the things I like to do is to write down 5 adjectives that capture who you are. Then what key experiences, perspectives, and or expertise do you bring to your social media profiles? I think sometimes we can tend to discredit our experiences, our perspectives, and our expertise, because when we look at it, we're like, well, anybody can do that. Anybody, people are like that, but no, you have a unique way of bringing things to the table. And then how are you different from other authors? How are you different in your messaging? And then what 2 to 4 topics do you think you should focus on your social media platforms in order to establish your thought leadership? I think if we can take the time to go through those questions, that will help us see and recognize how we are different. And then we can take confidence in sharing who we are on social media.
I love that. And I know one of your quotes in the book was stop studying your competitor and instead study who you are, which I think those questions will help so much to do that. But I love to, I don't know if this is the point where you shared it, but will you just share quickly the story about Michael Phelps? Like for those, if there's listeners that maybe didn't watch the Olympics or don't know much about his story, but I thought it was such a great visual for comparison for our listeners.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is probably one of my favorite stories ever. So Michael Phelps, gosh, what year was it? I think it was
I know.
2016, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
probably. Yeah.
So he's getting ready to go into competition. And there was a picture that was posted on the internet that, quite frankly, sent the internet into a frenzy. And so you look at the picture and you immediately know that Phelps has his game face on. And so people were talking about how this was this death glare, and it soon became known as hashtag Phelps face. And so, what was going on in the picture, according to Phelps, is that his competitor, Chad Leclos, was shadow boxing in front of him. And what Phelps said is that he refused to give this man one small glance. He went on to say, I was trying to not really look at Chad Leclos. He does his thing, I do my thing. So we have that picture that sent the internet into a frenzy. And then there was another picture that sent the internet into a frenzy, and it was during the 200-meter butterfly. And during this, you've got Phelps and Chad Leclos, they're in the lanes next to each other. And there was a picture captured where Chad Leclos was caught looking over at Phelps. And before we know it, Phelps took home the victory. And really, what I love about this is that when you look at the picture, you see that Leclos lost his focus, and it was that one distraction that very well could have cost him that gold medal. And so I think it's so vitally important that we are not distracted by what our competitors, and I'm putting air quotes around this, what our competitors are doing. Because if we are looking over at what they're doing, then we will never get the clarity or confidence that we so long to have when we are sharing the message that God has given us to share on our social media platforms.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So be different. And yeah, just that visual of that story. I mean, I just remember those Olympics specifically and Michael Phelps and all that going on. And that's such a great thing to think about. Yes. And I know as authors too, a lot of times it's, like how they're marketing their books, but even like when they start writing a book, they're like, oh, but so-and-so already wrote a book about this. And I can't remember years ago, I want to say it was Renee Swope. She's like one of my favorite authors. And she wrote a book called A Confident Heart. And I think it was her book. And I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but I think it was her book that when she was getting ready to publish it, or around the same time that she was writing it, that Beth Moore also had a similar book out. And again, I know it was Beth Moore, and I'm pretty sure it was Renee Swope that talked about this, but that it was so like, she got really discouraged about, oh, this other author who has this huge platform's already wrote a book on this. And I think that she even shared that publicly. And Beth Moore, replied back and said, but they haven't heard your perspective on this issue,
Right.
So which I love. I mean, like that book I have read time and time again, Renee Swope's A Confident Heart. So I think it was hers. I wish I could go back and find that tweet, or that exchange about it. But it was just like, oh yeah, we got to remember that, right? We are different and we have a different perspective on whatever this is that we're writing about and helping our listeners through. So I love that. So, okay. So the third tip for Be Worth Following is be real. And I love this kind of just piggybacks on what you just talked about, but you ask, does your audience really know you? So I'd love for you just to share a little bit about that one, Jen.
Yes. So here is my encouragement with tip number 3 about being real, is that you can be an online influencer who breaks the norm and doesn't create this picture perfect image. You see, this is what we tend to see on social media all the time, is how perfect everyone's life is. And the reality is your audience, your community on social media, they want to know the real you. Every post doesn't need to be picture perfect. And so I always encourage people to find the balance between being real and too much information, because your community connects with real, and you have to know what it is that you are comfortable sharing. And so when you share the stories behind your real moments, it reminds your audience that they are not alone. And those real moments immediately connect you with your audience. You become human to your community. And that's what your community wants to see, because most people cannot relate to perfection. I know I can't.
Right. Me too.
So your stories, your real moments are truly powerful in God's hands. And so I like to challenge people with sharing, maybe starting off small, sharing like one real moment on your social media profiles this week and see what happens. And I'll tell you, when I have shared some of my own real moments, it's been wonderful seeing engagement. In my book, I have a picture of me with a kettlebell, and oh my gosh, it's just not a pretty picture at all. But I shared it. Another time I shared about a post where I had just gotten my workout done, and my workout included running, and I was dead last. I don't care what workout I'm doing. If running is included, I am always going to come in dead last. I just am. Because I am slow. I hate running. And so I shared about that, and people connected with that. And then even back years ago, I shared about when I had a miscarriage, and I got DMs from women who had never shared that they had a miscarriage with anyone. So all of this to say that when you are real, when you share your real posts, your real stories, your real struggles, and even your real successes, that is what people connect with. So don't be afraid to do that.
I love that. I love seeing that, on the Instagram feed, how it's changed. Like it used to be that picture perfect, like everything had to match and you have to have a perfect little feed when you pull up someone's feed. And now it's like, no, you can tell that people on Instagram want to see that. They want to see the real picture, and like you said, they're engaging more with just the real life. And I love the quote that you shared in the book. It's people can't connect with fake and don't want to. So instead give them real. And I love how you just kind of talked through that so much. Another quote I had pulled too was social media is not about broadcasting. It's about inviting people in through storytelling. And I love how you just gave the examples of, some crazy, silly moments, right? Your workout and you making fun of running and stuff, but then also the heartfelt, true, authentic stories of something as difficult as a miscarriage that we know a lot of women can relate to that, but not everyone's called to share about it. And so thankfully for someone like you has done that, and been able to share through your heartache. So I feel for you. And Jim, but I'm so glad that, God called you just to share, because I can just imagine all the women that you affected, through sharing the real story. Yeah. Okay. So number 4 in Be Worth Following is be fearless. And you ask, what do you have to be afraid of? So I think that's, there's so many ways we could go about that, right? It's just even getting on social media and sharing, like you say, being real and sharing those stories, or, just like we talked about before we hit record, like we didn't want to do a live podcast, like there's just so many things that, we have good, solid reasons for being fearful, but I'd love for you just to kind of speak into that for our listeners that want to get on a social media channel and how they can get over the fear of, either just getting on it or the content that they're sharing.
Yeah. And that's a key question to ask yourself. What do you have to be afraid of? I think sometimes fear can really hold us back and keep us from sharing the stories and the message that God wants us to share on social media. Because, think about it. We go to social media and we see a lot of people disagreeing with this or that. We see debates, we see arguments, and especially if you have a specific perspective on something and you feel you want to share it, but you might not share it because you're afraid of what other people might think, that can be hard. And so I just really want to encourage each of your listeners to know that when God has placed something in your heart to share, move forward with it and share it. Will there be people that disagree with you? There will be. But if you can rest in assurance, knowing that God has given you that message to share, move forward with sharing it. Now, some of the other things that people might be afraid of when it comes to sharing on social media is well, video, I don't like the way I look on video. Or what if this isn't done exactly right or perfect? And so again, because of that stuff, we then end up not sharing on social media. And so the biggest thing I always like to encourage people with is don't let fear consume you to the point where you will not share what has been laid on your heart to share. Because when we allow fear to consume us, we end up missing out on experiencing God's best for us. And so one of the things that I would encourage your listeners to do is to fill in the blank to this statement. And the statement is, God, I will not allow my fear of blank to keep me from building my online presence. And so I would ask your listeners, how would you fill in the blank to this sentence? And then take a few minutes to form a mental picture of the fearless version of yourself. How would you lead online differently? How might your social media posts and stories be more confident, proactive, and true to who God has created you to be and called you to be? Like, once you see this vision of yourself, would you post that imperfect video you created? Would you post that unfiltered photo? Would you share that story that maybe you've been afraid to share before? Would you start to believe that you're an expert and that you actually have something good to share? Would you try something new? You see, our unafraid selves are who Jesus empowers us to be. And so I just want to encourage each of you to go for it. Be the real you on social media. And don't be afraid to offer what God has gifted you with and fitted you for, because this world needs your message. This world needs your stories.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I was just thinking about your quote that I had pulled from that was, when Christ calls you out of your comfort zone, be willing to step out. And I love that you were just talking about, don't miss out on God's best for us, but then also as authors, we've been called to share these messages, right? And if we don't get out and share it, then our readers are missing out, right, on God's best for them because they're not hearing about it. So, I love that one so much. Okay. So lastly, be worth following. Number 5, be social. Maybe this should have been number 1, but I know a lot of times, right, we get all wrapped up in these things that Jen's talked about, and we forget the whole point of social media is to be social and be connecting with people and building relationships. So what tips do you have to share so how our listeners can be social on social media?
Yes. So be social. That's what social media is all about. It's about being social with people on media. So don't be afraid to engage with people. Don't be afraid to experiment. And so here's one thing I want your authors to know is you don't have to be on every social media platform. Really think about your audience. Where is your audience? Wherever they are, that's where you should be. And then in order to be social, you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to see, okay, what is my audience engaging with? Are they engaging more with images? Are they engaging more with videos? Are they engaging more with tips that I put out there? Like, what is it that they are engaging with? And I will share this. And I know that every time I share this, there's always some people that are like, oh no, really? And that is that video right now is what all of these social media platforms are giving the most attention to is video. And so if you are creating video, you are going to have a much higher chance of your content being shown organically in the feeds of the social media platforms that you are active on. And so like on Instagram right now, Reels is what's really popular. But here's the good news is that immediately when we think of video, we think we have to be on video, but we don't have to be on video. Like, especially on Instagram, you can create reels, videos of different pictures that you have. So again, be willing to experiment and try different things, because that will help you see what's working and what's not working. Also, when it comes to being social on social media, make sure that you are using hashtags specifically on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, because hashtags still actually work. It's one of the ways that your audience can find you. And one of the things that I always recommend is to create a branded hashtag for your platform. So when my book, Be Worth Following, came out, I created a hashtag, Be Worth Following. And so now if I search for that hashtag, I can see posts that I've created. I can see posts that other people have created around that hashtag. I have one now for my podcast, She Impacts Culture. And so create a branded hashtag that you can not only use as you are sharing information around that topic, but also then you can go back and see how other people are using it. And you can encourage your audience to use that hashtag. And then that's one way that you can engage with them. So I really want to encourage you to do that. And then not only be willing to experiment, but think about the different ways that you can be creative with your posts. You don't have to do, again, what everybody else is doing. Is there something unique and different that you can do around your posts that will help you get the engagement that you want and the eyes on your content? So don't be afraid to take some time to just kind of brainstorm different ideas that you would like to try and see if people actually connect with. And honestly, I think that's one of the big things, is that we just don't take the time to write down and brainstorm different ideas because we're so busy. And I think if you did that, you might come up with some things that you're like, oh, that might be a good idea. Let me try that and see how my audience responds to it.
Yeah. And it's, and I think that's the nice thing. It's like a good, bad thing, right? That things move so fast on social, but that's what I keep telling myself. Like, that's the good thing about, if you're afraid to be on video, like I'm just like, I just get all kinds of issues about going live on video, but I keep trying to remind myself, like, it's going to be gone like that in a snap of a finger. Like if nobody watched it, oh, well, no big deal. No one's ever going to see it again, or, no one's ever going to go look for it. It's going to be gone. There's going to be 100 other videos in the next 2 seconds, to watch. Right. So get over that. But hey, I wanted to ask you on being social. So I remember years ago when I first connected with you, Jen. I mean, you've been teaching social media. This is definitely your expertise because you've been doing it so long. But I remember you were probably one of the very first people that I learned about how to like really set a plan, that there's content you're posting, but you also have to set aside time to engage. And I probably have it on one of my old computers somewhere. Like I still remember you had like a free download, that it was just basically like, here's your schedule. Like just take a few minutes to go whatever platform you're on and go engage with people. And I tell people that over and over and over and over all through the years, people about, how can I connect with new readers? And, they'll be like, how do you, build these relationships on Instagram? And I don't have a huge following by any means, but I've met a lot of people and I connect with them. I'm like, you got to be purposeful about it, right? Yeah. You got to really have a plan. And I know, like, I interviewed Ruthie Gray really early on in my podcast, and she teaches Instagram marketing. And, she was just like, spend twice as much engaging as you do putting content out there. And so I'd love just to hear maybe some tips you have on that, because I know, like you talk about, we spend so much time focusing on creating our content, but maybe we don't spend enough time even thinking, how can I do something different? Like, how can I change things up and see what my followers react to? But I'd love for you to just speak into our listeners about also making sure they're taking time to engage with their target listeners.
Yes, absolutely. I would encourage you to find a time slot each day where you get on and you just engage with people. I think one of the biggest things I see is that when people comment on your posts, you want to respond back to them. And sometimes people don't do that. They don't respond. If someone has actually taken the time to engage with you and share their thoughts or perspectives based on your post or your video, make sure that you go back and respond to them. Even if it's something as simple as, Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate this. Just something, because if you are not responding back to them, if you are not engaging with them, then they might not come back again and engage with you because they're like, well, why would I even share anything if they're not going to respond to me? So make sure that you really do that. Take time each day to just go through, respond to people. And then as you're going through the feed, maybe give yourself 5 to 10 minutes. And if there are specific posts that stand out to you, comment on those posts. If someone comes to mind, send them a DM, not a salesy DM, because goodness, I think we can probably all raise our hands and say, yes, we've got those. Those are annoying.
Yeah.
But, actually send somebody a DM and say, hey, I was thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Just something like that, because that actually makes a difference. I would encourage you, when you think of other people first, and when you think about engaging with them, that can make all the difference, because then again, people are like, wait, what? You responded to me? I can't tell you how many times people have said that to me. And I'm like, I am just an ordinary college professor gal. And people are like, wait, Dr. Bennett responded to me? Like, people just, they don't expect it. And then when you do it, it pleasantly surprises them. So engage.
Yeah, I love those. Are such great tips. Oh, Jen, before we close out, I do want to ask you though, just because you are a nonfiction author, would you share with our listeners how you are meeting your readers and marketing your own message today?
Yes. So that's a really great question, because I feel like right now I am in a transitional phase. So I have my Be Worth Following book out. And a year ago, I started the She Impacts Culture podcast, and I'm very passionate about helping Christian women see that the work that they do can impact and influence culture. And so right now, I'm actually trying to get clarity around my new message, rebranding, freebie, all of that in the direction of She Impacts Culture. And so I am doing a lot of different things, learning, meeting with other people to just get clarity around that myself. And my goal is, I'm actually going to be working on a book proposal this summer, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that something will happen with it. And then I'm going to be working on a new freebie and starting to share more around the message of that as a Christian woman, professional Christian woman, you have the opportunity to use your voice, your expertise, and your leadership to impact and influence culture for Christ. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now, in a transitional stage and looking at, I guess you could say, rebranding. Rebranding. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, and I'm sure, this underlying message is just going to continue through, right? As women, do come to you and figure out, how are we going to impact culture? Because, oh my gosh, is that not needed right now? And for sure, right. It's always needed, but now tenfold. So this has been really great, Jen. And as I said, these were just 5 tips to be worth following. Jen shares way more in her book, and I'll be sure and put a link to it in the show notes. And Jen, where would you say the best place is for people to connect with you?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's drjenbennett.com. And they can find all the information there about my book, my blog, all of my podcast episodes, learn more about me, and then find links to my social media platforms there. And really, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Dr. Jen Bennett.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you again, Jen, for being here today. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Y'all, I hope you were inspired by what Jen shared about how we can be worth following. Let's all aspire to be different and influence our readers the way God has called us to in this crowded social world. And speaking of social, I'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode. Hop over to Instagram and DM me at KimStewInspired. I can't wait to hear from you. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you back here in 2 weeks to help you market your book one podcast at a time.